Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing dumper decisions in December. I provide audio coaching to help people try and get their ex back or get a new girlfriend or boyfriend. Check out my website for more details, www.dateme.tips. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. So now let's get back into today's podcast. And today we are discussing dumper decisions in December. So if you have been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, you will likely analyse every decision that your ex makes. In today's podcast, we focus on 3 decisions your dumper needs to make in December and what these choices likely mean for your chances of getting your ex back. So let's get straight into this, and decision number 1 is, do they send you a Christmas card? So for millions of people around the world, Christmas is a very important date on the calendar, and on the lead up to Christmas, people exchange Christmas cards. So if you are one of the millions of people who celebrates Christmas, if you are one of these people who often, or at least sometimes, exchanges cards, it's very understandable for you to be wondering, will my ex-dumper send me a Christmas card? But the thing is, what you need to realise is that they will also be wondering the same thing. They will have the same question in their mind. So just as much as you might be thinking, is my ex going to send me a card? They're also really focusing on that fact, should I send them a card? Because of the connotations. Now, of course, there is no way of getting into the mindset of every individual person on planet Earth. That's not possible. So what we have to do is generalize. We have to consider the likely reasoning and rationale between and doing such things. So when we think, will your dumper send you a Christmas card? When they are focusing on this decision, they are likely realizing the fact that a Christmas card constitutes as a handwritten letter. You know, we're not talking about sending a text here. What we're talking is about sending a physical Christmas card. And if they take the time to buy a card, to write in the card, to either send through the post or to hand deliver a card to you, we have to establish from this that there is a lot more effort than there is needed. If you end a relationship and you don't want anything to do with this other person anymore, the last thing you want to do is really connect with them on a level which is so personal. Again, we're talking about writing a card here, something where there is additional meaning because there is extra effort. So if you receive a Christmas card from your ex, what I would say this means is that they certainly have a level of care still for you. Now, whether this is romantic care, whether this is love, whether this is lust, whether this is just platonic thoughts, this is something which is better than nothing, you might say. Now, if you want to get your ex back and you eventually find out that they only see you as a platonic friend, then of course this isn't the route you want to go down. This isn't what you wanted to hear. But at this stage, it's certainly better to receive a card than not. It shows something. It shows a level of thought and feeling. And this, of course, is a positive. Now, I do have to give a caveat. There are always caveats. There are always opposites. And what I would say is that the only main reason somebody would write a card, even if they don't have feelings, is if they feel that they need to do this to keep you on an even keel. If they are worried about your mental health, you may receive a card and it might not really reflect their true feelings. Now, only you will know deep down the likelihood of this. If you've been behaving in a way which is incredibly erratic and somewhat dangerous, you might find that you receive a card and ultimately in years to come, you tend to consider that this card was probably sent to you to try to keep you as focused and positive as possible, even though there wasn't any romantic or maybe even any platonic friendship attached to it. So if you receive a card, I would say that this dumper decision by and large means they have a level of care for you, a level of interest. There is the caveat, but it could be just because they're worried about you. But more often than not, it is because they still have some level of feeling. Now, if you don't receive a card, this doesn't mean you can't get your ex back. It doesn't mean that in the future your ex might not regrow romantic emotional attraction for you, and this is something which can help you going forward. However, right now, if you don't receive a card, it's probably a good sign to really show that your ex wants space, and you need to respect that. If you really want support with going through a breakup, whether this is trying to get your ex back, whether this is just moving forward through breakup recovery, you may want to consider my audio coaching service where me and you can speak one-on-one about your unique situation and problem. Check out my website www.dateme.tips for more details about how I can become your coach and your teammate through this challenging time. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast, the second decision that a dumper needs to make in December. And decision number 2 is, do they send you a text on New Year's Eve? So on New Year's Eve, it is a lot less likely to receive something such as a card and much more likely to receive something such as a text, Happy New Year, okay? Or it could be on any messaging platform. Now, if you receive a text on New Year's Eve from your ex, it's not a bad thing, but it's also not necessarily something to hang on to as, look, they really, really want to reconnect at this time. The reason I say this is New Year's Eve tends to be a time where people do blanket texts. They text, they contact their whole contact list at once. Now, unless you have a very specific, unique message attached to this contact, I would suggest that is not necessarily meaning that they want to reconnect with you. You know, I have heard of some instances where dumpers have actually sent out texts on New Year's Eve and they didn't even realise they'd sent it to their dumpee. They didn't realise, they didn't really think about it, and when they sent out a blanket text to everybody in their contact list, it also went to their dumpee. So unfortunately, it doesn't always mean that you are on the right lines. It doesn't always mean that your ex-dumper has feelings for you still. However, the caveat for this decision, almost a bit opposite to point number 1, is that it could do. And again, like I said just a moment ago, it does depend somewhat on the message itself. You know, what does the message say? Is there extra value in that message? Now, even if there isn't, this doesn't mean that you can't reconnect with your ex from this point. You know, I would always say if you receive contact from your dumper, you must reply. So in this instance, if you receive a text on New Year's Eve just saying Happy New Year, you know, I would say respond to that text saying Happy New Year back, of course, but may then add on a question. You know, I would suggest always adding on a question. You remember doing so by including a question mark at the end of your response when you know you've asked a question. And something simple to add in this instance would be asking something such as, what are your plans tonight? You know, what are you up to? Now, if you have been dumped because you were overbearing, if you've been dumped because you were needy, if you've been dumped because you were jealous, maybe be careful on this because it could come across as you still trying to check up on your ex. However, if that wasn't the case, you should feel free just to ask a question, ask what their plans are. And you never know, this could start to grow a conversation. So the caveat to decision number 2 is that it could be meaningful, but I would say by and large, if you just get a Happy New Year text, okay, respond to that, but don't hold it in the same value, you could say, as point number 1, a Christmas card which has been handwritten. Something which takes more effort is always going to hold more value than something which can be done within half a second. So just bear that in mind, but always think about your situation as a unique instance, because your relationship is unique, your breakup is unique, the aftermath is unique. Your situation is not necessarily exactly the same as anybody else's. So just play it by ear, see how things go, and stay positive. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast, the final decision that a dumper needs to make in December. And that is, do they respond to you contacting them? Now, I would always say that if you've been dumped, the default position is never to contact your ex unless they contact you first. But sometimes people will do this. And not only that, there are some rare instances where I do suggest a dumpee could reach out to their dumper. Now, one of these unique specific instances is actually in December regarding Christmas or New Year's Eve. And if you are a dumpee and you're wondering, should I reach out to my ex during this time? I would suggest that if you've received positive contact from your ex within the month of December, you can actually be the first one to reach out on Christmas Day or New Year's Eve. So, if you receive a positive interaction started by your ex in December, from the 1st of December onwards, then you can be the first one to reach out on these special days. So let's just say that happened. Let's say that on the 2nd of December, you received a positive interaction from your ex. Maybe they were just asking how you're doing. Okay, it's nice. It's not something which is over the top, but it's not something which is just zero, So something is always better than nothing. So say 2nd of December, your dumper texts you and asks you how you're doing. That shows they're thinking about you. It's non-necessary contact. This is positive. Let's just say you respond, nice interaction, but nothing particularly comes of this. So now we get to Christmas Day or New Year's Eve, and you decide to reach out to your ex. Happy New Year, or maybe a Merry Christmas. Maybe you actually send a Christmas card. Now, this decision your dumper needs to make is, do they respond to you contacting them? And this will ultimately dictate their current mindset. And what we have to realize is people live in the moment. They think in the moment, they behave in the moment. Life is lived in the moment. Somebody tells you they loved you years ago doesn't mean they love you now. It also doesn't mean they can't love you again in the future. So when we think about this on a very localized thought, just during December, they reach out to you at the beginning of December, and this means that they are thinking about you, presumably in a positive way. Then nothing else happens throughout December, then you reach out to them. Do they respond? Well, it will somewhat be dependent on their current position. Do they think and worry that they are leading you on if they respond? Maybe they've changed their mind. Maybe they think, I really shouldn't have reached out to them. I don't feel like we should be reconnecting at this time. I'm not going to respond, okay? However, if they do think that they don't mind building a connection with you again, they will likely respond. Now, the caveats. Unfortunately, there are always caveats. It's important for me to say. They might respond just by being polite. They might respond because they think they owe it to you. They might respond because they're thinking in a platonic sense, even though you don't want them to be platonic in their thoughts. This is something which they just see as nice that they want to just reply to you with. So what does it mean if they decide to respond to you? Well, again, I would say it's dependent on the follow-up. So you send contact out to them, they respond. We don't know for certain, but it is good news somewhat. What do you do then? You try to grow that conversation. If they were just being polite, you will find out fairly quickly that this was just them being polite. You will find out very quickly that they don't want to grow things particularly further than this. However, if it was from a place of genuine interest, you will see that conversation develop. And this is where you can find out your dumper's thoughts in December. If you believe that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description.